So my argument is that it's not about being chatty or loud or arrogant, but the difference between what we call extrovert and introvert is about how do we build bonds of trust with people. Hello and welcome. I'm William. I'm a sociologist at the University of Warwick, where I teach and do research, and I've worked on trust within small versus large organizations and how it changes all the dynamics. And I struggled for most of my life because I'm someone who likes to listen more than I speak, and I like to observe more than I make myself visible, which means it can be hard for me to talk in a group of people who I don't know. But conversely, I can be extremely at ease with people I trust, even there's 10 people. So, the boundaries between extrovert and introvert are, I would say, not only blurry, but maybe I'm thinking these concepts are a bit wrong and too black and white for translating the reality of this human experience. So in sociology, there are two main concepts related to trust: thick trust and thin trust. Thick trust is this very solid and strong kind of bonds of trust that usually develop with people you see face to face on a daily basis, like inside the same family, for example, or to some extent with close friends. It's the kind of trust that is so strong that if you have this kind of bonds with someone and they have a problem and they call you, even if it's 3 a.m, you will get up and go and help them. Thin trust is a trust which develops with people or things we haven't met. It's how branding or politics work. Because we see lots of people wearing products from the same brand, or because we've seen this politician getting traction on social media, then subconsciously we think that, well, if so many people go for this brand, or if so many people go for this politician, there must be something right about them. Of course, it's an illusion, but this is how the human psyche works. If we see lots of people doing the same thing, we subconsciously assume that this thing is valid, is good, is legit, and perhaps we should go for it. Social media celebrities, for example, are masters of thin trust, and this with something called parasocial interactions. So although we're never likely to meet them in person, they will still speak to us, to their audience, and show parts of their personal lives, which sometimes are very intimate, in a way that we would only do this with close friends. And this illusion of being included in their intimate moments creates this kind of trust. But of course, this form of trust is not reciprocal, because if you were to have a serious problem, do you think you can call them even at 3 a.m. and they will show up to help you? Of course, this is how thin trust works. So my argument is that people we call introverts are people who rely mainly on thick trust. If you want to be friends with them, you usually need to earn that friendship, which can happen over an extremely long amount of time, or meaningful conversations, or meaningful gestures. These are people who keep their guard up because they use their resources, their energy, and their time very carefully. Extroverts, on the other hand, are easier to trust because they project an image. They are subconsciously always in an exercise of branding themselves. We find them friendlier and we mistake them for being more open. While extroverts draw lots of people around them, they usually have less meaningful interactions. Introverts, on the other hand, have less people around them, but each of the people they have around them have their full attention. So in a way to caricature, if you're friends with an introvert, you're basically friends for life. Well, unless you stab them in the back or do stuff like that. The next question is more related to jobs and marriage. You may have noticed, why do so many mediocre people get ahead? Well, our society relies heavily on stimuli, buzzwords. Humans are per nature visual creatures, but the society has evolved to a point where we are less likely to question because we have less time to analyze and question what's actually inside of people's minds, and we tend to rely on what we see. Because there is such a reliance on people's appearance or exterior behavior and less questioning about their own experiences, this is how people who usually have not necessarily the skills, the experience, or the credentials to end up in some positions end up being hired or promoted just based on these superficial and aesthetical elements. If you want to read more about this, I suggest the book The Class Ceiling from Friedman and Lorison, or Alice Marwick's book about celebrity culture and self-branding in the Silicon Valley. If you ever wonder, do you need to change or to compromise to get ahead, my answer is a firm no, unless you genuinely believe that you have room for improvement in your character, your personality, or your values. Because no matter how you are, who you are, how you present themselves, you will always find people who do not like you, no matter what you do, even if you completely transform yourself. And I've produced a few videos which talk more in depth about this topic. Who you are is a powerful filter. It will filter out naturally people who would be toxic to you, and you will naturally attract people who vibe with you and align on similar values, vision of the world, society, or even your place and role in life. Of course, it's about practice and developing awareness, trying to spot red flags in people so you cannot be taken advantage of. And when it comes to rejection, criticism, it's all about making the difference between people who project onto you their own pain, frustrations, and insecurities, and the people who will make the effort of providing constructive and careful criticism because they genuinely want you to improve. It's all about building a confidence of being who you are. Once you get to that point where you're not worried about how others perceive you and you're comfortable being yourself, this is, I would say, 90% of the job done. One reason, for example, I wear waistcoats, and you will notice it's not a modern waistcoat, it's a 19th century waistcoat. It is not because I want to be seen as someone who dresses smart. There's a whole story behind this, and I talk about this in my mental health journey. I started to wear waistcoats because it was a way for me to cling on an idea of a better self who had the confidence to be whoever he wanted in the world. And this is a reminder for me and only myself that I am this kind of person. I have strength and I am resilient and I am able to navigate the society without caring about how people will judge me. This is just a piece of clothing. It's not something too extreme or too provocative, but still enough outside of the norm to know that people will judge me and put me in boxes because of that, because it's not the latest piece of cloth, because it's not a designer piece of cloth. It is something which is outdated, very old-fashioned. Saying that you don't care is easier said than done, and I can tell you I've been struggling for 15 years with that. So in practice, how do you navigate society and how do you get practical things like job or find a partner for life as an introvert, that's to say? Well, it's possible, and I think my journey is a testimony. I'm 36 and all of my jobs I got until now were never through job interviews, and I've done loads of them. I've been rejected to all the single job interviews I've done. All the jobs I got was through relationships, through friends. Every single job, from assistant mechanic in my local garage, to security agent, to waiter in a restaurant, to office manager for a small charity, to behind the till at Camden Market, to videographer, to researcher, all these single jobs was through acquaintances, friends. So what worked in my strategy was to rely on thick trust, making and nurturing solid friendships more than anything, building relationships, and hold on to the right people. When you work in a corporate environment and you're faced with things such as conflict, promotion, or just hiring, or even outside like meetings or marriage, All these things that seem extremely scary because it's about facing people we don't know and we don't even trust, and we don't know what to expect, and we feel this sense of this social pressure. It's all about breaking down these things into very small bits, which means, in that case, before any meeting, it's about meeting and consulting people on one-to-one. When a conflict arises, it's about being able to talk to the people personally, face to face, and with empathy. I would say, introverts are people of consultation and consensus and empathy. It's about listening. And when you have people face to face before there is a meeting, or before you go on to that job interview, this is what will get you to where you really want to be. But even if you look at history, thick trust was there everywhere. There is strong movements. Whether it is about how did the world's biggest religion spread, to how the biggest and most powerful social movements spread across the globe, it always started very small. It started with people who were not necessarily really charismatic, were not in situations of power, who didn't have lots of money, lots of networks, and people who gathered around them, people at the margins of the society. Let me tell you a story that I encountered in my fieldwork. I looked at initiatives that wanted to change people's approaches to protection of the environment. There is a charity that was set up in 2010 which wanted to make people adopt solar panels, water-saving measures. And at the same time, there's a friend of mine who graduated from the University of Westminster in herbal medicine. This charity started with lots of resources, government funding, big names supporting them, premises, 10 people working full-time, paid, and they had a huge network of volunteers. Fast forward 2020, the charity closed down. No funds, no resources, impossible to continue. And fast forward 2019, this friend of mine who was doing on her end small events in small community hubs, gathering 5, 6, 7 people. Fast forward 2019, she organized a meal with talks in a community hub where 300 people showed up. She organizes retreats in the countryside where people all over Europe are fighting to get a space on her retreats. What's the difference between them? She started with no resources, no money, no networks, and until now, she doesn't even use social media. She doesn't have awards, not major networks, and she never had an article in the press. Well, this charity, which had everything to make their mission successful, eventually closed down. And this, again, is a matter of trust. How did this charity approach their mission? They used to send volunteers who were in their 20s to, out of the blue, approach committees, organizations, and tell them, hey guys, you need to put solar panels. You need to change this and this and this and A and B and C to make it environmentally friendly. Even with the right arguments that, yeah, it's going to cost you less in the long term, it didn't work. Because imagine people seeing these volunteers in their mid-20s coming out of the blue and telling them you need to change completely the way you do things that you have been doing for 20 years. How do you think it's going to work? On the other end, my friend, she started with people in her own family, getting them involved, and her close friends, inviting them to her events or talks, workshops, doing things together. And when people saw the importance of that and also trusted her, then what you do? You tell your own friends, and they tell their own friends, friends of friends. And fast forward 2019, this is how, when she organizes something, 300 people show up. So it shows you that with trust, you can really move mountains, no matter how much power you have, how much money you have. If you are able to build trust, it can be a long journey, but at the end, the people you gather around you are going to be the most solid people you can imagine. So downsides, yes, it takes a lot of time and effort. There's also another catch, the environment you're in. For example, I had much more troubles trying to make friends in the UK than I had in France. In France, the culture is very, very different, and people are much more respectful of your skills, your qualifications, your experience, and even your passion than in the UK. And same thing in the US, where I had always much more support, much more job offers and opportunities than I ever had in the UK. If your society, the society you live in, doesn't give you the opportunities and you feel that you're trying to plant seeds in an arid land or in a desert, feel free to move. The world is big, and it's all about just risking it and trying to meet the right people. Of course, as someone who relies heavily on thick trust, I have my weaknesses, and I've been harmed, I've been abused, and people have taken advantage of me. And in the past, so now it's very difficult for me to give my trust. So it's very difficult for people to build trust with me or become my friends with the usual small talk, because it doesn't tell me anything about the person. I want to dive into deep conversations in topics such as, how do you see your place in the universe? What is the meaning of life? What are the biggest challenges you have overcome in your life? Because small talk, what do you do as a job? Where did you study? How much do you earn? Doesn't tell me about your qualities, your values as a person, if I can trust you or not. When I talk to people in normal or like normative standard social settings, I usually try to disrupt the social norms, which means that when people ask me, what do you do? I usually say things like, I'm sitting and just talking to you. Or I would say, when they say, what do you do as a living? I say, I bake pizza at home, because I'm not lying. I'm actually baking my pizzas at home as a way of sustenance. But instead of saying that I'm a researcher, I'm a videographer, I earn that much, published X amount of books, and so on, I prefer to say things that will disrupt the norms and the standards established by the society and see how do people react. And depending on their reaction, it tells me where I can lead the conversation, where it can bring me, what can I expect to talk about with them, and how likely are they to listen to me, and then if we are potentially be able to be on the same page. Another weakness of mine is I cannot stand, meaning I cannot trust people who are contrived. People who, let's say, would sell out or commodify themselves just for their personal gain, trying to display a very specific image, play a character in the society instead of being themselves. People who, let's say, have an ego and use this ego to harm others, to compete with each other, to put other people down, and especially if they target people who are more vulnerable than them. I will not provoke conflict, but usually I will set very strong boundaries. I will either protect myself or the people that I see they are harming from them, because I just cannot tolerate people harming others. I believe in restorative justice, meaning that I will not seek punishment for these people, but rather a way to understand them in the first place and trying to find a way to resolve what is going on here. I believe that people can change, they can become aware of the harm they're doing and improve themselves, but it's a very long process. Unfortunately, some people need to first open their eyes and be aware that they're doing harm before you can even think about changing themselves, which usually happens when they experience traumatic events or events which are so emotionally charged that they are able to stop and reflect on themselves and their lives. This is what I have seen from experience. This is something I have studied in my research. And as many people have said, it's very sad, but sometimes you need people to crash and burn for them to realize and take another direction in life. Also, I don't like to interrupt conversations. I find it very rude. I don't want to dominate in a room. I think this is also against my ethics. It's not a good practice to interrupt people or to make yourself heard unless you have something very important to say. I am someone who is more of a listener. I want to listen first. What do people say? And I flourish in spaces which give attention to everyone, where there is a power balance. where there is consultation and consensus. But the thing is, for extroverts, while they are not necessarily seeking to build bonds, by speaking often, they are signaling to others that they are available for conversation, and it is often misinterpreted as a sign that they are open to judgment of others and therefore trustworthy. Introverts, on the other hand, are very good observers and listeners and are very good at thinking independently of a group rather than following the crowd. Paradoxically, while introverts can be quite independent, the problem is that other people often mistake them for not being open to conversation, resulting in introverts being further isolated. However, introverts love a good conversation, and good is the key word here. But how many people will go out of their way to acknowledge the presence and start a conversation? And this is a theory. This is why introverts later down the line develop social anxiety, because we know that social gatherings are very lonely places. However, I'm very much aware that breaking social norms requires you a very high level of confidence that I was only able to get at age 35 and 36 after all the misadventures I have experienced, and which has helped me understand why and how of people, and that ultimately people don't really care about you. But what will make a difference is how do you care about people and what you are willing to do to support people. And when you are into this phase, then you will see that it will completely change the relationship you have with other people, because this is how thick trust people work. It is about establishing these bonds of thick trust, which take time and effort. But at the end of the day, it is the sum of all these relationships that make it something great. And again, the society tells us to advocate for ourselves. That if you are in a work environment, you need to make yourself heard, that you have X, Y, Z qualifications, that you have X, Y, Z skills and basic qualifications. That you are an achiever, that you are a leader, a term to which I'm opposed. I believe in the idea of steward rather than leader. There's a video on that. But it is possible to survive and navigate in this environment if you make others advocate for yourself. And this again, can you make this? How can you make people stand for you? It is again by these one-to-one interactions. The friendships you will build will be the people and the walls who will basically pillars who will support you when you need it the most, hopefully. So that's it really. I hope this video was useful, as well as my bits of experiences in theory. So I just hope that anything that you experience which is difficult is made easy for you. Hang in there, take care of yourselves, and until next time.